We just got on the wrong train. We found the right one though. It's coming in 3 minutes. We're gonna be late, but it's gonna be okay because hopefully it's not busy and we can still get good seats.
Event here. Yes, well, it started earlier, so you might want to go quite quietly. Thank you.
People love Beyonce, so it's hard to imagine that with such a love of
that was part of the reason that people seemed really enraged that Blue Ivy's hair wasn't the texture of one of Beyonce's weaves. Like, this is because it's teal.
No, exactly.
Guys, we came late and there are no seats. Wait, did you see any seats? Damn. Should we grab some chairs?
So would you say a lot of the negative framing of Afro hair and tightly coiled hair, would you say?
It sounds like it's something hundreds of years ago. These countries were only colonized like relatively recently. So I'm not talking about some distant ancient Africa, but I'm talking about kind of philosophies and ethics that come from an African, from a West African, often Yoruba, what I refer to a lot, perspective. There's all of these studies and all of this amazing knowledge that exists, but people don't really know about it. So what the book has kind of facilitated has been to bring some of those quite like radical ideas, actually, like very socially progressive ideas, in by stealth, because people aren't necessarily going to read an African philosophy book or an African history book, but they're going to read something about hair. So hair is like a popular, kind of populist way of bringing in some of those more kind of like complex or like academic African studies conversations. But I always try and do it in a really accessible way, because I know a lot of academic texts are impenetrable. Really, like. So in terms of the perception, I loved going to SOAS, apart from my classmates. It was the first time I was ever taught by Africans. I was in the Africa department. Sadly, there are fewer and fewer African lecturers there now, but I was lucky enough to be taught by some really amazing ones. That was the first time I'd been taken seriously in an educational environment and not treated as though I was some sort of delinquent, which I assure you I was not. But certainly like studying African studies in SOAS and being taught by African lecturers was really like an important experience that I had, and definitely kind of put me on the path that has led to what I do now, and certainly to writing the book. Going to the School of African and Asian Studies to study African studies, I had mistakenly assumed there might be something of a black cultural life at the university. But for the most part, my cohorts were of the white hippie variety. Coming from Ireland, I was of course intimate with white people, but this tea drinking, poi swinging, drum playing, often dreadlocked variety was new to me. The point that I'm making, I don't need to read it because I obviously remember it, given that I wrote it, was that I remember taking my braids, I had some braids in SOAS at one point, and I took them out and my hair was a hot mess. Like I didn't know how to like kind of care for it naturally. So the braids were out, it was like dirty, it was uncombed, it didn't look good. And all my classmates were like, oh my God, it looks amazing. Oh my God, like, I love your afro. And I was like, this is wild. It looks like shit. And then anyway, I quickly went and had it relaxed and came in like feeling like all fresh and good. And they didn't like that at all. So that heavily processed look was definitely not a look that was popular with those kind of white people. But that was far more, so even though it was straightened, it was far more aesthetically black.
Yeah.
So I think that's quite interesting as well. In Ireland, at that time, people weren't like, oh, you're mixed race. Occasionally they might be like, oh, you're half caste, but usually it was you're just black, and that's a problem. it was usually words that are not as kind or as nice as black, but essentially it was like you were black. So I had a very, also I didn't have any mixed race people in my family. The family that I'd been with till I was 5 were all Nigerian. So I actually just kind of saw myself as black. I didn't really think of like mixed race too tough like that. Then I started going to America and started going back to America, and this is like in the 90s when I'm a teenager, and they didn't really have mixed race there either. It was like light skin blackness. That's where I was really introduced to colorism. Maybe I don't write about that much in the book, but I've written about it in other places. So in Ireland, I went from being like the dark one to literally getting a plane 8 hours later being like the light one, and all that meant. And I was like actually blown away by like the amount of attention, bless you, the amount of like attention I was getting. And it was nice because obviously in Ireland, like I was really far from like the beauty standard, and suddenly I was the beauty standard, and so I was like, oh, this is brilliant. But then I was just like, no, like this is actually really, really messed up. And I had actually anticipated, I was just like, okay, so white people in Ireland, as far as I'm experiencing, are really hostile to black people. Black people haven't really done anything to white people, and there's still this hostility. When I go to America, they're gonna hate white people because white people have done so much to them. I'm clearly half white. I'm gonna get so much shit. That's what I was prepared for. Oh, no, that wasn't the case. I was literally like, as I said, the amount of attention I was getting was insane. But that was mostly from males. And there was kind of hostility often, and assumptions from women that I was like big-headed, or I thought I was too nice, or I was all of these things. But I'm coming from somewhere where I'm not getting treated like that, so I don't really have those ideas about myself. But I did often think, if I'd grown up here, I might be a monster, because if I constantly had people kind of pulling me out for like special treatment just by virtue of my proximity to whiteness, like what would that have created? I like to think that because of the way I think about things, I would have rejected that, but I still think that would have had a really damaging effect on the kind of person that I was. It was actually when I moved here then that I was casually referring to myself as black, and one of my friends was like, a black friend was like, you're not black. And I was like, excuse me. But she's like, you're mixed race. And so that's why my PhD is about mixed race identity, because I had a lot of stuff so it's something I've thought about very deeply and written about very, very extensively. But it's always interesting like how you're placed differently in different geographical locations.
Yeah.
I guess I've dealt less with I know there's sometimes kind of anger or resentment or hostility towards mixed race people, and I understand often why that's there. I've also had people say quite strange things to me. I was in South Africa and I took out, I had like Bantu knots, and so I'd had my hair like set and blow dried and then put in Bantu knots, and when I took them out, it looked like I had these like glossy, like silky bouncing curls. That is not what my hair looks like. And it's taken like a lot of work and hours for it to look like that. But because I'm mixed, the assumption was, oh, that's just her natural hair. So I remember I was talking to this guy and he was like, God, like your hair is so beautiful. He was just like, that's the kind of hair that like, African girls have to pay for. I was like, that's the kind of hair I have to pay for. Actually. But he was expecting me to be like, oh yeah. So I'm like, has he said stuff like this to other people and they've responded well?
Yeah.
Like we ended up having a fight. But yeah, sometimes, yeah, I understand why those tensions are there. It is sad because it is kind of divide and conquer. And I think it's something that like needs to be, yeah, it needs to be addressed. But I understand why it exists.
So I got my copy and I'm excited. I'm excited AF because this is basically like African history, which you guys know I need to know more about. And I know nothing about. So I have a book about hair and history written by this cool woman.
Words from Redemption Song, which tell us none save ourselves has the power to free our minds. I couldn't quote it directly because I couldn't afford to pay for the direct quote. So that's why it's a bit of a remix of what he says. So yeah, you know Redemption Song, but ourselves can free our minds. This is the rallying call. It is the invitation to tear this shit down, to reject that which rejected you. We do not need to further perpetuate psychotic colonial fantasies about who we are. Over 100 years ago, Du Bois wrote about the danger in seeing oneself through the eyes of the colonizer. Yet here we are today, still reproducing the very same norms. Understanding our past makes it easier for us to identify the future that we want to create. Much of what we are conditioned to believe is natural is not. Certainly it is not universal, nor just the way things are. We have choices in what we collectively recognize as valuable. For me, great possibilities exist in my recognition that the society I live in was designed with my exclusion in mind. Never again will I mutilate any part of myself in an attempt to one day awkwardly almost fit in. We have the freedom to design a reality of our own making, one that recognizes our humanity and thus reflects our highest needs. We are the ones we have been waiting for. So yeah.
So it's 2019. It's officially 400 years since the first black bodies were shipped off on a ship. So we celebrate and we toast to black liberation because the world is changing, power dynamics are changing, and it literally is our time now. So cheers to everyone black.
Purchase your tracks today.
They look like twins. Is that rude to the ancestors to like compare Chinua Achebe and Nelson Mandela?